The boring history of the U.S. interstate highway system. A calm narration for sleep, study, or quiet listening. Septenu. Welcome to another deliberately boring journey by Firelight. In tonight's episode, we will travel very slowly through the history of the U.S. interstate highway system. This is not a story of fast cars or roadside diners. There will be no dramatic crashes or presidential speeches, just pavement, planning, mile markers, and asphalt, told in a steady monotone to help you relax, focus, or fall asleep. The nation that paved itself. America is a land of roads, wide, straight, efficient. But it wasn't always this way. In the early 20th century, roads were often dirt trails, inconsistent from town to town. The idea of a unified, paved, nationwide highway system didn't exist. What changed that, slowly, was a growing need for standardization, trade, and military readiness. At the center of it all was a president named Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower's Cold War vision. In 1919, long before he became president, a young Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower participated in a grueling cross-country military convoy. It took over 2 months to get from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. Trucks broke down. Bridges collapsed. Roads turned to mud. The experience stuck with him. Decades later, as president, Eisenhower remembered that journey and combined it with what he observed during World War II, the smooth, fast-moving autobahns of Germany. He saw firsthand how a well-designed highway network could move tanks, troops, and supplies with efficiency. In 1956, his vision became law. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. On June 29, 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act. It authorized the construction of 41,000 miles of interstate highways across the United States. The act promised federal funding covering 90% of the costs, with states responsible for the remaining 10%. The system would be called the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Each component of the bill had been debated in congressional subcommittees. Budget allocations, concrete specifications, signage standards, and route approvals were all meticulously reviewed by state and federal agencies. Engineers from the Bureau of Public Roads issued long technical reports about road width, curve banking, and merge lane lengths. Everything was planned on paper, in triplicate. A network of numbers. The interstate system was designed to be consistent and logical, at least in theory. Odd-numbered highways would run north to south. Even-numbered ones would run east to west. The numbers would increase from west to east and from south to north. So I-5 would run along the Pacific coast. I-95 would trace the Atlantic. I-10 would span the southern states. I-90 would stretch across the north. 3-digit numbers would be reserved for beltways and spurs. I-495, for example, would circle Washington, D.C. Mileage markers would begin at the state line and increase as you traveled north or east. Exit numbers would typically correspond to mile markers, though some states, like New York, initially used sequential numbers instead. All of this, of course, required maps, typewritten memos, and committees. The geometry of interchanges. One of the defining features of the U.S. interstate system is the interchange, the architectural choreography that allows cars to exit, merge, and flow between highways without traffic lights. These interchanges come in a variety of standardized designs, each suited to traffic patterns, land availability, and budget. The most iconic is the cloverleaf, a design introduced in the 1920s that allows vehicles to make left-hand turns by looping around on a ramp. It is compact, but not ideal for high-speed traffic. Then there are directional interchanges, which include flyovers and sweeping curves. These are preferred in areas with heavy traffic, but require more land and materials. Each curve and ramp must be engineered with super elevation, the banking of curves, and precise grades for deceleration lanes. Other configurations include the diamond interchange, the trumpet interchange, and the stack, a complex multi-level interchange where several roads cross in three-dimensional space, often with towering pillars and tight spirals. Design standards for these interchanges are outlined in the Green Book, published by AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. Standardization and signage. Every road sign on an interstate highway, from the green exit boards to the white on black speed limit signs, follows strict guidelines. These are laid out in the MUTCD, or the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Fonts, reflective materials, mounting height, and even the size of the arrows are regulated. Signs must be legible at specific distances based on speed. Overhead gantries are used for complex junctions or multi-lane roads, while simpler roads may use shoulder-mounted signage. Highway shields, the red, white, and blue signs that indicate an interstate route number, have been standardized since the 1950s. Even the shield's shape and spacing are consistent across all 50 states. The intention was to make navigation intuitive. A motorist driving from California to New Jersey would never be confused by inconsistent road signs. Construction materials and roadbed design. Beneath every paved road lies a carefully engineered foundation. Most interstates are built with multiple layers: subgrade, subbase, base course, and surface. The subgrade is the native soil, which is often compacted and treated. The subbase and base course are layers of crushed stone or gravel that distribute the weight of vehicles. Finally, the surface is made of asphalt, or Portland cement concrete. Decisions between asphalt and concrete depend on cost, climate, and maintenance schedules. Asphalt is quicker to lay and repair, while concrete lasts longer but takes more time to cure. In colder regions, engineers account for freeze-thaw cycles. Drainage systems, expansion joints, and rebar grids help prevent cracking and buckling. In desert states, the roadbed must tolerate high heat and occasional flash floods. Each mile of road requires surveying, grading, soil testing, and load-bearing calculations, tasks carried out by civil engineers, often working in quiet offices surrounded by blueprints and calculators. Rest areas, way stations, and amenities. As highways stretched across the country, provisions were made for travelers and freight carriers. Rest areas were spaced roughly every 30 to 50 miles. These simple facilities usually include parking, picnic tables, vending machines, and restrooms. Some rest areas in scenic regions feature observation decks, historical plaques, or landscaped gardens. Way stations are placed near state borders to inspect commercial vehicles. Trucks are required to pull in, where their weight is measured and documentation is reviewed. This ensures compliance with weight limits and tax regulations. Service plazas, more common on toll roads, provide fuel, food, and other amenities. These plazas often host recognizable national chains and serve as logistical anchors for long-distance travel. All these facilities are managed by state departments of transportation, with funding allocated based on traffic volumes, maintenance needs, and infrastructure aging. Route planning and state negotiations. Behind every stretch of interstate pavement lies a web of negotiations, political maneuvering, and logistical compromise. While the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 created the framework and funding, the actual routing of highways was heavily influenced by state governments, local officials, and regional priorities. Each state was responsible for proposing routes within its borders, subject to federal approval. State highway departments submitted detailed maps and justifications to the Bureau of Public Roads. These proposals considered factors such as population centers, economic corridors, existing roads, and expected traffic patterns. Inevitably, politics played a role. Cities lobbied to be included in the network, fearing economic isolation if bypassed. Some towns insisted on multiple access points, while others fought to avoid a highway slicing through their center. The federal government's primary interest was in connectivity, ensuring a continuous, efficient national network. But on the ground, decisions were often shaped by who had the most influential legislators, the loudest business coalitions, or the most organized landowners. Eminent domain and land acquisition. Once a route was approved, states faced the task of acquiring land. In many cases, this involved the use of eminent domain, the government's legal authority to expropriate private property for public use with compensation. Thousands of homes, farms, businesses, and vacant lots were appraised, surveyed, and acquired. Property owners were issued notices. Some accepted buyout offers, others resisted, resulting in lengthy court proceedings. In urban areas, entire neighborhoods were razed to make way for highways. This disproportionately affected communities of color and low-income residents. In cities like New York, Detroit, and New Orleans, highways were routed through neighborhoods deemed blighted, a term that often masked racial and economic bias. In rural areas, farmers lost grazing land, access roads were rerouted, and parcels were fragmented. Compensation was based on land value, not sentimental attachment or long-term livelihood impact. Though legal and often necessary, the process left scars, physical, economic, and emotional, across communities. Urban bypasses and rural highways. One of the key planning decisions in the interstate system was whether to route highways through the heart of cities or around them. In many cases, engineers chose bypasses, loops or alternate routes that skirted urban congestion. These became the beltways and ring roads that encircle major cities today. I-285 in Atlanta, I-610 in Houston, I-495 around Washington, D.C. Bypasses allowed through traffic to avoid local congestion, but they also shifted commercial activity. Suburbs flourished along these new corridors, while inner-city businesses sometimes declined. Conversely, some highways were routed directly through urban cores. These urban freeways required massive demolition and engineering feats, including elevated roadways, tunnels, and interchanges wedged between existing infrastructure. Examples include I-75 in Cincinnati and I-10 through downtown Los Angeles. In rural areas, interstates often followed the path of least resistance, straight lines across flat plains, avoiding mountains, wetlands, or historic sites when possible. These roads offered high-speed links between cities and opened up remote areas to development. Design controversies and environmental impact. By the 1960s and 70s, as more highways were constructed, opposition began to grow. Citizens raised concerns about noise, pollution, community division, and environmental degradation. One famous case was the proposed extension of I-95 through Washington, D.C., which would have displaced thousands and bisected neighborhoods. After years of protests, lawsuits, and political pushback, the project was canceled, making D.C. one of the few cities without a complete I-95 link. The environmental impact of highways became a national issue. Roads cut through forests, wetlands, and habitats. Runoff from asphalt carried pollutants into rivers. Noise barriers had to be added in residential zones. The National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 required environmental impact statements for large infrastructure projects, adding another layer of review and delay. In San Francisco, the Embarcadero Freeway was halted mid-construction due to public backlash and was eventually torn down decades later. In Boston, the Big Dig rerouted FUI 93 underground to reduce surface-level disruption. Case studies in infrastructure and delay. California's I-5. Stretching from the Mexican border to Oregon, I-5 passes through cities, deserts, and farmland. Its construction required vast coordination between regional districts. In the Central Valley, negotiations with agricultural lobbies influenced routing to minimize disruption to crops and irrigation systems. Texas's E-35. Serving as a backbone from Laredo to the Red River, I-35 passes through major cities like Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas. Its central section is frequently congested, and expansions have been proposed for decades. The complexity of urban sprawl, right-of-way constraints, and local politics have made upgrades slow and controversial. New Jersey's I-78. Originally planned to connect to the Holland Tunnel in Manhattan, the final leg of I-78 was canceled due to community opposition. Today, the highway ends abruptly in Jersey City. The ghost ramps and wide shoulders near the terminus are relics of the unbuilt section. The business of highways. Contractors, bidding, and corruption. Building thousands of miles of roads required an army of contractors, from small local asphalt pavers to multinational engineering firms. Contracts were awarded through a bidding process managed by state departments of transportation, DOTS, which published requests for proposals, RFPs, for grading, paving, bridge construction, and signage. In theory, the lowest qualified bidder won the contract. In practice, the process often involved backroom negotiations, political favors, and, at times, outright corruption. Reports from the 1950s and 60s document cases where contracts were steered toward companies connected to state officials or donors. Despite these issues, the system did create efficiencies. Competitive bidding helped lower costs. Project schedules were segmented into manageable phases. Specialized contractors focused on culverts, overpasses, or resurfacing. Subcontracting became a norm, and entire industries arose around highway materials, from precast concrete firms to reflectorized paint suppliers. Interstates and the rise of suburbia. Few infrastructure projects shaped American lifestyles as profoundly as the interstate system. With high-speed highways connecting city centers to rural outskirts, commuting became more practical. Suburbs expanded outward, often following the paths of new roads. Developers bought cheap land along new exits, building subdivisions, strip malls, and business parks. Zoning laws were updated to accommodate residential sprawl, and the post-war baby boom found its domestic frontier in these new suburban enclaves. The automobile, once a luxury, became essential. The interstate system encouraged one car per adult households, two-car garages, and the shopping mall economy. Drive-thrus, motels, and big-box stores flourished along exit ramps. Yet this transformation came with trade-offs. Public transit systems declined in many cities. Car dependency increased. Older neighborhoods lost tax bases to suburban flight. And urban sprawl strained environmental resources, extending utility lines, increasing emissions, and fragmenting ecosystems. The role of the military in route design. Though primarily civilian in use, the interstate system had military motivations. The original legislation was championed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had seen firsthand the difficulties of cross-country troop movements during his military career. One commonly cited requirement was that 1 out of every 5 miles of interstate be straight, allowing use as emergency runways during wartime. While not a formal rule, it reflected broader defense considerations. Routes were planned to connect military bases, airfields, depots, and ports. The Defense Highway Act of 1941 and later the Strategic Highway Network, STRANET, ensured that roads met certain load-bearing standards for tanks and heavy trucks. Bridges had to accommodate convoys. Road shoulders were widened for breakdowns and maneuvering. These military aspects were rarely visible to the average driver, but they shaped engineering standards in subtle, enduring ways. Toll roads, turnpikes, and public-private partnerships. Not all highways were free. Some states, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, relied on toll roads to finance construction. These included the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the New York State Thruway, and the Ohio Turnpike. These roads predated the 1956 Act and were later integrated into the interstate system. Toll booths collected fees based on distance traveled. Funds were reinvested into maintenance and expansion. Over time, many states moved to electronic tolling, Easy Pass, Sun Pass, and others, reducing congestion at entry points. In recent decades, some states embraced public-private partnerships, P3s, where private firms finance, build, and operate toll roads in exchange for long-term revenue rights. This model sparked debate. Supporters cited cost savings and innovation, while critics raised concerns about access, accountability, and profit-driven pricing. Texas, Florida, and Virginia became leaders in P3 experimentation, resulting in managed lanes, express tolls, and reversible corridors. The cultural footprint of the interstate system. Beyond its concrete and steel, the interstate system left a profound cultural legacy. It inspired songs, from Route 66 to Life is a Highway. It shaped genres of film and literature that romanticized the open road. Roadside diners, neon signs, and kitschy attractions became Americana. The system also influenced migration patterns. Retirees moved south via I-95. Snowbirds followed the 75 to Florida. The Pacific Coast's I-5 became a lifeline between tech hubs and agricultural valleys. Travel guides were published for highway adventurers. Exit guides listed gas stations, hotels, and restaurants. Families planned vacations around iconic routes like I-80 or I-40. The road trip became a rite of passage. Meanwhile, photography of interstates, their symmetry, emptiness, or chaos, entered art galleries and museums. The highway was no longer just infrastructure. It was iconography. Legacy and maintenance challenges. By the late 20th century, the interstate system was largely complete, over 46,000 miles across all 50 states. But with completion came a new challenge: maintenance. Pavement ages, bridges corrode, traffic increases, weather events, floods, snow, hurricanes stress the system. The cost of upkeep now exceeds new construction in many states. Highways require resurfacing every 10 to 15 years. Bridges must be inspected and repaired. Tunnels need ventilation upgrades. Guardrails and signage must be brought up to modern standards. Funding remains a constant concern. The Highway Trust Fund, financed by federal fuel taxes, has struggled to keep pace with inflation and fuel efficiency gains. States supplement with their own taxes, tolls, and general funds. The interstate system, once a marvel of expansion, now faces an era of preservation. The conversation has shifted from "where do we build next?" to "how do we keep it from crumbling?" Modern innovations and smart highways. As the 21st century progressed, the concept of the American highway evolved. While the original interstate system focused on mobility and defense, newer efforts have focused on technology, efficiency, and sustainability. Smart highway technologies began to be introduced in major metropolitan areas. These included real-time traffic monitoring systems, dynamic signage, automated tolling, and incident detection using AI-powered cameras. Highway management centers coordinate with emergency services, maintenance crews, and state patrols to keep traffic moving smoothly. In some states, variable speed limits are used to manage congestion. Electronic message boards update drivers on conditions ahead. High-occupancy vehicle, HOV, and high-occupancy toll, HOT lanes aim to incentivize carpooling while allowing solo drivers to pay for access. Electric vehicle charging corridors are being established along interstates. These corridors feature high-speed charging stations at regular intervals to support long-distance EV travel. California, Texas, and Colorado are among the leaders in this effort. As autonomous vehicles slowly begin to emerge, highway planners are studying how to adapt road markings, merge zones, and digital mapping to accommodate mixed traffic. While full autonomy is not yet widespread, the groundwork is being laid for future integration. Bridges, tunnels, and engineering marvels. While much of the interstate system consists of standard roadways, there are dozens of engineering feats that stand out due to terrain, scale, or innovation. The I-90 bridge over Lake Washington in Seattle is one of the world's longest floating bridges. Constructed with hollow concrete pontoons, it spans over a mile across the lake. The Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado carries a 70 under the Continental Divide at an elevation of over 11,000 feet. Completed in the 1970s, it remains one of the highest vehicular tunnels in the world. Boston's Big Dig rerouted I-93 underground through the heart of downtown, a project that took nearly 20 years and over $14 billion. It replaced an elevated freeway with a network of tunnels and green space. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel in Virginia stretches 17.6 miles, including both low-level trestles and 2-mile-long tunnels. It connects the Delmarva Peninsula with the mainland and is considered a modern engineering wonder. These projects required geotechnical analysis, weather modeling, seismic design, and years of planning. They showcase the intersection of engineering and public policy, and they continue to serve as case studies for infrastructure programs worldwide. Highways and racial justice, the movement to tear some of them down. In recent years, a growing movement has called attention to the racial and economic injustices embedded in the original highway construction. Many urban highways were routed through minority neighborhoods during the 1950s to 70s, resulting in displacement, economic decline, and community fragmentation. Cities like Syracuse, New Orleans, and St. Paul are re-examining the long-term effects of their highway designs. Activists and urban planners are advocating for highway removal, capping, building parks or housing over highways, or rerouting traffic to restore community cohesion. In Detroit, a proposal has emerged to convert parts of I-375 into a boulevard with pedestrian and business access. In Rochester, the inner loop east was filled in and replaced with surface streets. These efforts aim to reverse decades of damage and reclaim urban space for the people who live there. The Biden administration's infrastructure bill includes funding for Reconnecting Communities, a federal program supporting projects that repair the damage caused by previous transportation policies. While politically and logistically complex, these conversations mark a shift in how infrastructure is evaluated, not just in terms of efficiency, but in terms of equity, justice, and long-term impact. The future of the interstate system. Looking ahead, The future of the interstate system will be shaped by emerging technologies, demographic shifts, climate resilience, and policy innovation. Autonomous freight convoys may reduce human driver fatigue and improve safety. Drone-based bridge inspections can identify micro cracks before they lead to failure. AI traffic modeling may help cities reroute flows in real time during emergencies. Climate change poses new threats: flooding, wildfires, extreme heat. Highways in coastal areas will need to be elevated or reinforced. Drainage systems are being redesigned to accommodate flash floods. Materials are being tested for heat resistance and longevity. Demographics are shifting too. As populations grow in the Sun Belt and decline in some Rust Belt cities, transportation priorities are being reassessed. The next generation of infrastructure will likely blend highways with rail, bike paths, and multimodal hubs. Finally, the funding conversation continues. With fuel tax revenue declining due to electric vehicles, alternatives like vehicle miles traveled VMT fees, congestion pricing, or carbon-based tolling are being explored. What began as a grand vision in 1956, a national system of interstate and defense highways, is now a living, evolving organism. It remains the backbone of American commerce, travel, and daily life. Highway signage, fonts, symbols, and standards. A seemingly minor but critically important element of the interstate system is its signage. Standardized road signs are vital for safety, navigation, and driver confidence, especially at high speeds. The foundation of modern highway signage in the U.S. is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, first published in 1935 and regularly updated by the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA. It dictates everything from font size and color to symbol design and spacing. The distinctive green background with white reflective text is now ubiquitous. The font most commonly used is called Highway Gothic, officially developed by the Bureau of Public Roads in the 1940s for legibility at distance and speed. More recently, a font called Clearview was briefly adopted due to its improved readability, especially at night. However, debates over licensing and standards led to a partial return to Highway Gothic. Exit numbers, mile markers, speed limits, and directional signs must conform to specific dimensions and contrast ratios. Arrows are standardized. Route shields, like the red-white-blue Interstate shield, are used nationwide. Even the spacing between letters is calculated based on legibility under motion blur. Beyond function, these signs have become part of the visual identity of the American road, icons of travel and exploration. Rest areas, welcome centers, and scenic overlooks. Another key feature of the interstate experience is the rest area, a place to pause, stretch, refuel, or learn. Most states maintain rest areas approximately every 40 to 60 miles along major highways. These include parking lots, restrooms, vending machines, picnic tables, and in some cases, pet areas or playgrounds. Some have 24-hour security or live staff. Welcome centers are more elaborate, often located near state borders, and offer tourism brochures, interactive exhibits, and state maps. These centers reflect regional pride and promote local attractions. Travelers entering Tennessee on I-40, for example, might be greeted with blues music, whiskey facts, and Smoky Mountains guides. Scenic overlooks, particularly in mountainous or coastal regions, provide designated pull-offs with views. In the Rockies, the Appalachians, or along the Pacific coast, these viewpoints are often paired with historical plaques or geological information. While modest in appearance, these stops offer crucial services for long-haul drivers, families, and tourists alike. They are also part of the highway's hospitality layer, softening the impersonality of concrete and asphalt with moments of rest and reflection. trucker culture, and the freight backbone. The interstate system is not just for passenger cars. It's the circulatory system for freight transport across the country. Trucks carry more than 70% of all freight moved in the U.S. by weight. From refrigerated produce and Amazon packages to lumber and automobiles, these goods depend on reliable highways. Trucker culture has developed its own language, norms, and rituals. CB radios, truck stops, way stations, and rest breaks form a unique subculture. Jargon like 10-4, Hammer Lane, and Bear in the Air once filled the airwaves. While cell phones and GPS have replaced some of the old tech, the community endures. Major trucking corridors include I-40 for east-west freight, I-95 for north-south along the East Coast, and I-80 across the Midwest. Some cities, like Dallas, Atlanta, and Chicago, are freight hubs, combining highway interchanges with rail, air cargo, and warehouse distribution centers. Truck stops, such as Love's, Pilot, and TA Travel Centers, offer showers, lounges, mechanic bays, and parking for hundreds of rigs. These stops are essential infrastructure, providing fuel, rest, and safety. The interstate system's design includes considerations for freight, generous shoulder widths, minimum vertical clearances, and rest areas equipped to handle 18-wheelers. Without these features, commerce would slow dramatically. Weather and disaster planning on the interstate. Given the size of the U.S., the interstate system must operate across a wide range of climates and natural threats, from blizzards in Minnesota to hurricanes in Florida, wildfires in California, to flash floods in Arizona. State DOTs work with federal agencies to develop weather-resilient infrastructure. In northern states, salt domes and snowplow fleets stand ready. In the south, drainage systems and hurricane evacuation routes are clearly marked and coordinated. Some stretches of highway are designated hurricane evacuation routes, especially in coastal regions like the Gulf Coast. During emergencies, these roads may be turned into contraflow lanes, where all lanes head in one direction to move people inland. In fire-prone regions, vegetation is cleared along road shoulders to create fire breaks. Traffic signs may display fire warnings. In the Rockies, avalanche control measures include barriers and controlled snowslides above highways like I-70. In seismic zones such as California, bridges and overpasses are retrofitted with earthquake-resistant technology. After the Loma Prieta quake in 1989, federal policy was updated to require seismic evaluations of all critical highway structures. Technology also plays a role. Weather sensors embedded in pavement, satellite-based emergency alerts, and dynamic digital signs help protect drivers in real time. Tourism and the national parks connection. Highways also serve as arteries to one of America's greatest treasures, its national parks. The interstate system often provides the fastest routes to park entrances, though the parks themselves remain blissfully free of high-speed roads. Interstates such as I-70, I-40, and I-90 pass within reach of parks like Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, and Acadia. Spur roads and scenic byways, often designated with brown signs, guide travelers the final miles. Park-adjacent towns benefit from this proximity. Moab, Utah, near Arches and Canyonlands, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, near the Smokies, and Bar Harbor, Maine, near Acadia, have become seasonal tourism economies, thanks in large part to the interstate system. Road trips through national parks are a rite of passage for many families. RVs, campers, and tour buses make their way along feeder routes. Some visitors string together long loops, a western circuit that might include Grand Teton, Zion, and Bryce Canyon. The interstates make this scale of travel possible, bringing millions of visitors each year into nature and reinforcing the American love affair with the open road. Historic routes beneath the asphalt, pre-interstate highways. Long before the interstate system reshaped America, a patchwork of early highways formed the country's first long-distance roads. These were often state-funded, poorly maintained, and rarely paved, but they formed the backbone of 20th century car travel. The Lincoln Highway, established in 1913, was the first transcontinental highway for automobiles, stretching from Times Square in New York City to Lincoln Park in San Francisco. Unlike today's interstate routes, it passed through town centers, often doubling as a main street. Other historic highways included the Dixie Highway, connecting the Midwest to Florida, the Yellowstone Trail, a route promoting access to the national park, U.S. Route 66, the Mother Road linking Chicago to Los Angeles, made famous by migration during the Dust Bowl and post-war Americana. When the interstate system was proposed, many of these early routes were either bypassed or directly built over. Some sections of Route 66 were absorbed into I-40, while US 30, part of the Lincoln Highway, was paralleled by I-80. Remnants of these historic roads still exist, often marked with brown heritage signs, and have become pilgrimage routes for nostalgic road trippers and vintage car clubs. Motels, diners, and roadside architecture. The development of the interstates gave rise to an entirely new architectural and cultural landscape along the roadways. Nowhere is this more evident than in the evolution of motels and diners. Before the rise of chain hotels, mom-and-pop motels dominated the roadside. Often one-story tall and arranged in a horseshoe shape, these motels featured neon signs, themed decor, and names referencing nearby attractions or highways, like the Thunderbird Inn or Highway Haven. Diners became the primary food stop for travelers. These streamlined establishments often used stainless steel, large windows, and counter seating. The menu was consistent: coffee, pie, burgers, and breakfast all day. Architectural styles flourished. Googie architecture, with its futuristic angles and space-age signage, symbolized the optimism of post-war car culture. Novelty buildings in the shape of coffee pots, hot dogs, or teepees lured in children and families. By the 1980s and 90s, many independent motels and diners were supplanted by national chains, Holiday Inn, McDonald's, and others, offering consistency and predictability. However, preservation efforts and a resurgence in vintage Americana have helped restore some of these gems. Highway patrol and traffic enforcement. Safety and order on the interstate highways are maintained by state-level highway patrol or state police forces. Each state has its own division, like the California Highway Patrol, Texas Highway Patrol, or Florida Highway Patrol, tasked with enforcing traffic laws, assisting with accidents, and ensuring commercial vehicle compliance. Highway patrol officers operate specially equipped vehicles, often with radar detectors, license plate scanners, and emergency tools. Their presence deters speeding, impaired driving, and reckless behavior, especially in high-traffic corridors. Speed limits vary by state and road type. In rural Texas, some interstates allow speeds up to 85 miles per hour, the highest in the U.S., while urban segments in cities like Boston or New York may limit drivers to 50 miles per hour or lower. DUI enforcement, seatbelt compliance, and distracted driving campaigns are also central to highway patrol efforts. Public education programs such as Click It or Ticket or Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over have become national campaigns tied to interstate safety. Despite the serious nature of their work, patrol units also assist stranded motorists, provide hurricane escorts, and even deliver babies when timing demands. Bridge and tunnel marvels. No discussion of the interstate system would be complete without highlighting its engineering marvels, particularly its bridges and tunnels. These structures span rivers, mountains, and urban landscapes, connecting the network where roads alone cannot go. Some notable examples: the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, Virginia, a 23-mile-long combination of bridge and tunnel that connects the Delmarva Peninsula with mainland Virginia. The George Washington Bridge, New York, New Jersey, one of the busiest in the world, spanning the Hudson River with double-decked traffic. The Eisenhower Johnson Memorial Tunnel, Colorado, the highest vehicular tunnel in the U.S., piercing through the Rocky Mountains. The Big Dig, Boston, a massive urban tunneling project to reroute I-93 underground, which took decades and billions to complete. These projects required complex planning, geological surveys, custom equipment, and often political compromise. The result? Uninterrupted connectivity in even the most challenging terrains. Tunnels in earthquake zones are reinforced with shock-absorbing joints. Bridges are inspected regularly, and major failures, like the 2007 I-35W bridge collapse in Minneapolis, have led to stricter federal oversight. Surveillance, data, and the digital highway. In the 21st century, the interstate system is no longer just a physical grid. It's part of a digital ecosystem. Most major cities now operate traffic management centers, TMCS, that monitor live feeds from cameras along highways. These centers can control digital signage, update GPS traffic reports, and coordinate emergency response. Weigh-in-motion sensors check truck weights without requiring a stop. Pavement sensors measure temperature and moisture. Some areas are testing vehicle-to-infrastructure communication for autonomous cars. License plate readers, while controversial, are used to monitor stolen vehicles, amber alerts, or toll violations. Privacy debates continue over how long data is stored and who has access. Apps like Waze and Google Maps depend on these data streams to estimate traffic, suggest reroutes, and estimate arrival times. In the future, AI may help optimize lane usage, alert drivers to road hazards before they happen, and predict maintenance needs before failures occur. The legacy of the interstates. Now decades into its operation, the U.S. interstate system remains one of the largest and most ambitious public infrastructure projects in world history. It has shaped urban growth and suburban sprawl, migration patterns and real estate values, industrial logistics and retail access, cultural identity and American storytelling. Criticisms persist about its role in segregation, climate impact, and auto-dependency. Yet, it also represents national unity, freedom of movement, and the promise of progress through public works. Whether you're taking a family road trip, hauling freight, or simply commuting to work, the highway hums beneath your tires, a quiet testament to vision, concrete, and time. You have now reached the end of this extended, calm exploration of the U.S. interstate highway system, a journey across decades of planning, politics, engineering, and impact. From the first mile in Kansas to the elevated ramps of Los Angeles. From the toll booths of the Pennsylvania Turnpike to the smart corridors of Texas. From displacement and injustice to innovation and renewal. This is the story of how a nation paved itself together. Thank you for listening. May your roads be smooth, your exits well marked, and your rest deep and uninterrupted.